Hi, anyone and everyone. Welcome to Have You Heard About This Case? My name is Sam.
And my name is Kelly.
Today I'm going to bring you a case that I found fairly recently, and kind of as many of the others that I've brought forward, I feel like I can really relate to the victim today. But before we dive in, Kelly, what's your question for us today?
Okay, so my question is a little more deep, but could be fun. What is a memory that is your favorite from childhood or stands out to you from childhood?
Oh, goodness. Do you have one that comes to mind, and I'll think of it as
I
you're talking?
do. Yeah, absolutely. So one of my favorite memories from my childhood is that my dad had a classic car while we were growing up. It was a
Ooh.
61 Mustang or 69. Sam, am I? They didn't make the
It was
Mustang in
69.
61. It's 69. Okay. I thought that was two on the nose. I was like,
I
it can't
forgot he
be.
had that.
It is. He did. He had a 69 Mustang and it was yellow with black detail. And we
Ooh.
loved going on rides in that car. And my dad would take it to car shows and he would take us and we would just piddle around at the car show. And, we just loved, like, whenever my dad was like, you want to go for a ride? We were like, yeah. And it just stands out to me because I just remember the smell of like the gasoline coming off the old car and the sound of the wheels and the motor as it rev up at the light. So that stands out to me, even though there are many. Maybe because it happened often. He often took us for drives
Right.
in the Mustang.
Well, what's really funny is right as you started that, before you even said your dad had a classic car, I thought of one which is very similar.
Oh yeah.
Well, yeah, we used to go for a lot of rides when I was a kid. Like we still did the Sunday drives when I was little.
Oh, that's nice.
And one thing that was always on Sunday mornings on XRT was breakfast with the Beatles.
Oh,
And we did that
yes.
a lot.
Oh my gosh, that is just like perfect for you guys. Sam's family is just they're up there with some of the biggest Beatle fans I know. Except my Uncle
Yeah, it
Jimmy,
might be an obsession.
you've got to meet my Uncle Jimmy sometime because my
Yes, I
uncle
do.
I should Jim, God, my Uncle Jim is a huge Beatles fan. Like he had cutouts of the members in his basement when we were growing up. He had like
If
album
I had that, like, I
covers.
would have that. That's something I would
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really funny that we kind of have the same story.
We talk about this a little bit off air, but our families and particularly our dads are quite similar because we're
Yeah.
both from pretty small towns originally, and they're both kind of lake towns, and both our dads started as mechanics on cars. So
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't surprise me that both of ours are car related. My dad was just he could fix anything on a car, but he ended up being a bus mechanic, and I may have shared some of that during Danny Green's episode, but it doesn't surprise me that we have some of the same memories.
Yeah, it's just funny because we met in our late 20s, early 30s.
Mm-hmm.
But like when we talk about our childhoods, it's like we know each other, but we don't.
Yeah.
Just because there were so many things that were so similar to us as kids.
It's very similar. And one other thing that ties us back to why we're here, that speaking of relating, we have been following really closely the Delphi case because we both relate so much to those young girls like 14, 15, going down to the creek to hang out, like that's what we did when I was growing up.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
used to go
another.
hang out in a trestle bridge all the time over the lake. Like, we used to
Yeah.
climb underneath that trestle bridge all the time as kids.
Yeah, and we did the same thing, just hanging out by the creek down at the park, and it was a big deal when you were old enough to like go by yourself. And so I think that's why
Mm-hmm.
we're both so interested and invested in what happens with the Delphi case.
Yeah, and actually, True Crime Garage just announced yesterday that they're releasing a book about Delphi. So that kind of dates this
Oh,
episode, but I saw it on Instagram
oh,
yesterday, so that's out.
that that is awesome. I do a lot of my research for the pod from books, Sam, as you know. So it often takes
Hmm.
me a little longer to get caught up. But gosh, when they write good stuff like that about cases, it's just great to have that deep dive.
Yeah, and I'm an audiobook person, so I'll like if I have the opportunity where I'm doing something like very simple at work, I'll listen to my audiobook all day and
Mm-hmm.
it's great. But that
Mm-hmm.
kind of works well into our case here because again, I feel like I can really relate to this victim and I feel like Kelly, you're gonna kind of be in the same shoes here.
Yeah, I'm interested.
Yeah, and we mentioned right before we hit record that you haven't heard this case, so I'm pretty excited to tell you. It's a very sad case, but there's a lot of
Okay.
things that happened afterwards that are for good, and we'll
Oh,
we'll
well,
talk
that's
about
good.
that at the end.
All right. Well, I'm ready. I can't wait to hear what you've got.
Today we're going to be talking about Marissa Mathy-Zvaifler. I believe that's how you say her last name. Please let me know if I'm wrong. It's not the easiest.
We took a shot. You
But
did good.
I took a shot. This case is actually from 2003. So I tried to like YouTube news so I could hear like reporters saying it, but it's before YouTube was a thing, and I couldn't find anything. Marissa was only 16 years old when she was murdered.
Mm.
She was born on February 28th in 1987 in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And this would make her right between my age and Ash's age.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that kind of like feels like she's kind of right in that same time frame as me.
Yeah, yeah. This is close to me as well. I was gonna say when you
Hmm.
said it was '03 and she was 16, I was like, oh, in that ballpark too.
Yeah. Marissa was an only child, and when she was a kid, her dream was to become a dolphin trainer.
Mm,
And I just think that's so
That's
wholesome.
that's so nice. Like that is.
Marissa was also an incredibly talented athlete. She played softball, gymnastics, basketball, soccer, cheerleading, and dance.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Yes. That's quite something there. That's
And she did all of this while being a great student.
oh man. More power to her.
Right? And again, you and I have talked about this off air before. I can really relate to this in a couple ways. I was involved in an insane number of extracurriculars throughout high school.
You were. You
Like,
every time we talk
I
about
was
it.
at school at 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day. It
Ooh,
was crazy. But
I
one thing that is different is I was not an amazing student. I was just an average student. I put everything into my extracurriculars.
yeah, hey, you know, can relate to some of these extracurriculars because I danced for all of high school. I danced 5 times a week. So I can't
Mm-hmm.
imagine commitment like that to dance, but also commitment to cheerleading, to soccer, to basketball, to gymnastics. Like athlete's the right word for her, especially gymnastics. That's so hard. And
It is
then,
hard.
yeah, that's your whole body working out.
Mm-hmm. And then being a fantastic student on top of everything, that's just like,
Right.
she really seems like she had her things together. And it seemed like, from an outside perspective, that things were easy for Marissa.
Mhm.
She was charismatic. She had this ability just to draw people in and make them feel welcomed. And, life is not always as easy as it seems. But by all accounts from Marissa's friends and family, they all said that she liked being a people person, and that just really came naturally to her.
Mm.
And then as she got a little bit older, her next career dream was to become a fashion designer.
Mm.
And it really seemed like this was going to be her career path. In high
Cool.
school, she'd make a lot of her own clothes.
Cool.
And some of her friends actually kind of called her clothes a little outrageous, but they always followed it up by saying that she just had this incredible ability to freely express herself. And I think that's just incredibly admirable.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, your clothes say a lot about you. And I have always been fascinated with folks who have the ability to make their own clothes. I think that is like the epitome of good hobbies, good tasks. Like, I just am always enraptured by people who can make their own clothes. So even if they were like a little silly, she's a high school aged girl. She's still experimenting, you know?
Yeah, and it's not easy to make your own clothes,
No.
especially when you're trying to teach yourself.
Oh,
It
no.
is a lot of trial and error. Like it's not easy, but then also to make something and feel that confidence to wear it around.
Absolutely. Because your clothes say
That's a
something about
different
you.
thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I really love the way that they describe her as being able to freely express herself. Because I feel like us, as a human race, we spend a lot of time worrying about what other people think. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that kind of leads us to sometimes kind of forget what makes us who we are as individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And
I
it
agree.
sounds to me like she just had this ability to control that mindset and allow herself to truly be herself. And I think the world needs more of that. And so I think that's something that
Yeah.
needs, it's admirable to look at for her.
Yeah. That's something that I love to hear that a 16-year-old has that confidence. And I hope that it's,
Exactly.
I love to hear that because it's something that I'm trying to build up as an adult. So it's
Mm-hmm.
very humbling because you just, you look at these younger people and you're like, wow, I just wish I was able to express myself that way and be that confident. So it's quite unique that she was like this at only 16.
Right. Exactly. And it sounds like this confidence was contagious. She was an advocate for the LGBTQ plus community. She was part of
Love
the
it.
Gay Straight Alliance when she was in high school.
Oh,
And
love
she
it.
also led workshops that focused on sex education as a teenager,
Wow.
which, again, I think is a great thing. There's this just incredible stigma when it comes to sex, especially as a teenager, the idea of losing your virginity. It takes a lot of confidence to talk about it at that age, and in turn, help educate your peers.
Yeah, that is again quite admirable. Quite, to be reaching out in so many ways to her fellow students to connect with them is
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. I think that is, you know, because this was happening in '03. Maybe there was less like social media. We're always on our phones. There, of course, was less social media. Um, and sometimes I feel like the social media of it all robs us of those human connections. So
Oh, I agree.
it's really great to hear that she was just reaching out to everyone at her high school, that
Mm-hmm.
is that is quite admirable as again, yeah.
There's a website, marissamission.org, and it sounds like a fantastic organization that was inspired by Marissa. And we'll talk about it a little more later. But they had this page that was dedicated to her and her story. And I really want to read a little bit of what they said. I really think they just said it so beautifully. And I don't think I could put it into my own words and have the same impact. But I feel like this is a really fantastic summary of Marissa. It's difficult to put into words the beauty and exuberance that was contained in this young woman. She was an old soul that moved through the world seeing through eyes of an innocent child. She had the ease and grace uncommon of most 16-year-olds, or any age for that matter. She was the epitome of gorgeous both inside and out, tall and elegant, with bright blue eyes and a smile that could not be ignored. She wasted no time in life, exploring, sharing, loving, laughing, and living every moment to its fullest potential. And she had a warmth and openness that drew many things to her, and she gave freely of her love and time to anyone who was lucky enough to be around her. The world was her friend, and she had no time for enemies or discontent.
Oh,
I just think that was so beautifully written.
It is. And it, even the way it's written draws you in. Hearing about how she was draws you in to her story.
Mm-hmm.
Like the part where they say, an ease and a grace, but also that she wasted no time in this life. I love hearing that. I love hearing
Mm-hmm.
that she lived every moment of her life with joy. It's great to hear.
Yeah, these are definitely the sort of people that I am drawn to.
Mm-hmm.
These are the type of people I am inspired by. So
Mm-hmm.
I would like them in my life so I can learn and be more like that and
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
become who I want to be. And so it's hearing something like this from somebody who's 16
Yeah. And
is
also,
inspiring.
it's beautiful the phrase she gave freely of her love and time. That is,
Mm-hmm.
again, such a humbling quality in a 16-year-old girl that I am, uh, in admiration of.
Yeah. So now let's get to what happened to Marissa.
Okay.
On July 16th in 2003, Marissa and her friends went to a concert at the Sunshine Theater in Albuquerque, New Mexico. They went to go see a group called Atmosphere, who is a hip-hop duo out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And unfortunately, Marissa's mom actually did not want her going to the concert. And a big reason for this is it was in Albuquerque, which is about an hour to an hour and a half away from Santa Fe, where she lived.
Oh, okay.
And as you can likely tell, Marissa was a good daughter and she generally followed all of her parents' rules.
Mhm.
This is one of the rare instances where Marissa broke the rules and went anyway.
Oh, no. Ooh, that's... Sorry.
It's a hard one because it's out of character
Mm-hmm. And
in a
I
teenage
just...
way. Like she's
Yeah,
a teenager.
that's what gives me the reaction it does. Because I'm like, oh, she's only 16. And, like, whomst among us has not bent the rules, busted the rules in half when we're 16, you know?
Yeah, like I was really lucky as a teenager to not need to ever consider sneaking out as an option. Um, I was definitely the teenager who went to as many concerts as possible.
Right.
And if you've ever listened to any of our other episodes, you've heard me talk about my love of music,
Mm-hmm.
especially my love of live music.
Mm-hmm.
I consider it kind of like an addiction. Like if there's good music, I want to see it live.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Oh, sorry. I get why she might have broken the rules for this.
mm-hmm.
I
Well,
understand.
exactly. And like I was lucky enough to not need to consider it because it was rare that I got a no. As long as I created a plan and I figured out transportation, gas, a place to stay, people to go with. Usually my parents were fine with it.
Yeah.
90% of the time it was my sister going with me, so that was more
Yeah.
incentive.
Yeah.
But I totally understand this from Marissa's perspective.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And I understand that, like, you you follow the rules so well and so often, and you decide, like, maybe this one time I deserve a break. And
Exactly. You
I,
rationalize it to make that
yeah,
decision.
and I'm very much in the same boat as you. I didn't really have to sneak out of my house. Did I try to? Sure, maybe. But the thing is, my dad slept on the main floor and could hear that garage door open like anything. So I never snuck out because I knew
Yeah, I
it
never
wouldn't
did.
work. I just asked to go out, and they were always cool with it.
Yeah,
Especially
same.
once,
My parents always
especially
had the attitude of like, if you're going to make good decisions, go ahead.
exactly. And I have something that's quite beautiful that I wish for anybody in the world, which is ever since I was a little girl, my father has always told me that no matter where I am, no matter what I'm doing, if anything is to go wrong, I am to call my dad and he will come and get me. I wish
Hmm.
that for everyone in the world. I'm very
Yes.
lucky. And I know that not many people can say the same thing. And so I was very lucky because around this age, the age she is 16, you start driving, you start, you know, making different decisions for your life. And I just always had that fail safe that I could always call my dad.
Yeah, and I had the same thing, and
Mm-hmm.
it gives you more confidence, and it gives them a whole lot more confidence,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that you are comfortable doing that if you need to.
Yeah, yeah. And it when I was 16, there were times when I called my dad and said, "Dad, I got to get out of here." Because, when you're 16, sometimes you may have ridden with another friend. You end up in situations you may not have predicted. So I was very
Hmm.
lucky.
Yeah, and I feel like Marissa was probably in that same sort of boat in reality.
Hmm.
But also, you think about this is 2003. People don't have cell phones in their pockets like
Yeah.
they did when we were like, cell phones were
Hmm.
becoming a thing when we were turning around the age 16. This is a few years
Hmm.
before that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But this night, Marissa and her friends really kind of decided to go all out. They rented a limo for the night, and the whole drive to the theater, they listened to Atmosphere, and then the concert started, and they're all just singing and dancing and just having the time of their lives.
Oh,
This is
I
a band
love that.
or a hip hop group that they really loved, and especially Marissa. She was a huge fan.
Hmm.
So they started the night off so well.
Yeah.
And at one point, Marissa ends up barefoot. And this might seem a little odd if some of you aren't concert goers, especially at an indoor concert being barefoot. But I've seen this a lot before. You wear cute shoes, you end up in pain, you got to take them off.
Hmm.
Um, I've never done this, but I am also not the fashion person. And if any of you have seen my wardrobe, you can tell.
Oh,
I
well,
like
but
comfort.
Marissa was a fashion person. So
Yeah, and I've never
that
seen it like
makes sense.
explained that she took off her shoes because her feet hurt, but that
Mhm.
makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And unfortunately, Marissa ended up cutting her foot on some broken glass.
Mm.
And this happened near the end of the concert, because Atmosphere was actually covering a Rage Against the Machine song. And if any of you know Rage Against the Machine and have listened to them before, I'm assuming many of you because they're great.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this really formed kind of a bigger than usual mosh pit.
Oh.
And Marissa got caught up on this, and that's how she ended up cutting her foot open.
Oh no.
And honestly, I don't really know if mosh pits are still a thing. I feel like if I watch like a concert video or the concerts I've been to in the last few years, I don't see them. I don't
That's
know if
a
I'm just old.
really that's a really good question. Maybe we're just old. Young people
I
who
would
are
say, are we
listening to
old? They
this,
don't do it
y-
anymore,
young
or
people, young people, do we still mosh or no? Because back when we were kids, we were moshing hard, and it's a
well, you
great
and
way
I
to
just
cut
got
your foot.
concert tickets a couple days ago, and we
We
both were
did.
like, we need seats.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yes.
we're not
Chairs.
going to be in general
Mm-hmm.
admission.
No. I'm not standing down there on that
We've reached
floor.
that age.
Yes, I need a chair where I can put my coat, and I need a little elevation because I'm short. But I remember the days of Moshin and how easy it
Right.
is to get. It's like a current in a tide. It just pulls
Yeah,
you
you could
in,
just get stuck.
and you get trapped by these people. So I see how she kind of might have cut her foot and been
Hmm.
trapped in. Oh gosh.
Yeah, and so after she cut her foot, Marissa and her friend Kai went upstairs to the venue to see if they could try to get any potential remaining shards of glass out and hopefully bandage up her foot. And unfortunately, Kai just really wasn't having any luck removing any of the shards of glass. You know, those can be so tiny, it can be hard to
Yeah.
see. You're also at a concert,
A
so there
dim.
might not be
Yeah.
good lighting.
Yeah, I was gonna say dimly lit, probably difficult to pick them out.
And it does also sound like the cut wasn't terribly bloody. And if you can't like it's difficult to see glass if there's blood as well, because that's obviously something else obstructing your view.
Mm-hmm.
But also, if you don't know like where it is, the blood kind of like directs you to where it's coming from, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
And so it's like he couldn't find where the glass was.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure this was very painful for Marissa. Glass is very, very painful.
You're right.
And unfortunately, this kind of caused a little bit of an argument between Marissa and Kai. He was just trying to help. I'm sure because it was hard to see, because the shards were probably very, very small, that they kind of bickered back and forth, and he ended up kind of just walking away. And, you know, this is an argument between good friends. You know, probably in 10 minutes that they'd both just brush it off and be fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's sort of like a high stress situation, a concert, you know, so it doesn't really surprise me that
your emotions went from like so high to kind of just drop down because you're suddenly in pain.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that it might have led to like a small spat, you know.
That's what it sounds like. It was something that wasn't very intense, but it was like, okay, I'm gonna give you a minute. We'll see you when you're ready type of comment.
Mm-hmm.
And they assumed like the concert was basically ending at this point, that she'd get herself patched up, and then they would all just meet up at the end of the concert, take the limo back home. Mm-hmm. Then after the concert, all of Marissa's friends waited for her so that they could start to head home. They knew where she was when Kai was trying to help her with her foot, but they didn't know where she went after that. Mm-hmm. And as we were saying earlier, we've said in other cases, this is 2003. Not everyone has a cell phone in their pocket. They can't just give her a phone call or a text.
And even if,
being on the other side of the building.
Yeah, even if they do, in 03, texting might not even be a thing yet. And Sam, I don't know if this is the case for you, but I feel like a lot of the concert venues that I've gone to do not have great reception, even these days.
See, I feel like these days there's a difference of like too many people in one place.
Mm-hmm.
But I think back in the day, it was a lot of like interference of stuff. Mm-hmm. And then, like, maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe I made that up. But I just feel like that was a little more of the case back then. Mm-hmm. But also, I remember in 2003, we had one cell phone for the whole family. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of like who had it that day.
Right. Who's leaving the house. Yeah.
Exactly. And if she went against her parents' wishes,
yeah,
if that was a similar case, she probably didn't take a cell phone with her because she wouldn't wanted to let her parents know.
Tip them off. Yeah, yeah.
So her friends went around to look for her, but they just couldn't find her. They waited for an hour after the concert ended before taking the limo home. Chelsea, another one of Marissa's friends, she had the limo take everyone straight to her house where they could tell Chelsea's mom and get some help. Mm-hmm. Then around midnight, Marissa's friends had to make that phone call to Marissa's mom saying that she didn't come home. And I cannot imagine how difficult that call had to have been.
Yeah. Oh no. A midnight phone call about your daughter who you think is home.
Right.
Oh
I'm
no,
not
I
sure they
can't
necessarily
imagine.
thought she was home. Like, they might have thought she was at a friend's house. I never saw that, like,
Right.
defined anywhere. But
Mhm.
still, you thought your daughter was safe and
Yes.
in Santa Fe, not in
Yeah.
Albuquerque.
Yeah. And now at midnight, you're hearing she didn't come back with us.
And Chelsea's mom really kind of immediately knew that something was wrong as well.
Mm-hmm.
She actually prepared all of her friends by saying, prepare yourself for the worst before they made that phone call.
Oh.
And I can't imagine having to do that as a parent as well, because obviously we talked a lot about Marissa and how involved she was with everything, how caring she was.
Mm-hmm.
So immediately Chelsea's mom knew if she didn't come home on that limo, then there's a reason she didn't come home. That was not her choice.
Right. Right. Oh no.
And so I imagine having to sit down your teenage daughter to say, prepare for this while you call
Right.
your
Right.
best friend's mom to say she
Yeah.
didn't come home.
Yeah. Also call her mom and you tell her. Which I mean, I
Right.
understand because you've got to, you have to have people take accountability for their actions, even if they're younger. And maybe that's what she
And they
was trying to
did.
do. Yeah, it sounds like that's what
Yeah, no, they
everybody did.
absolutely did.
They went straight home to get help. They
Mm-hmm.
they reported it to her mom as soon as they got home. But yeah, I can't imagine how difficult that must have been.
Yeah, and we don't really know exactly the last time she was seen. Like, obviously, when Kai helped her with her foot,
Mm-hmm.
but we know it's been hours. They waited for a full hour after the concert. Then it was
Mm-hmm.
an hour, potentially an hour and a half drive home, and then having to talk to Chelsea's mom. Like, you're talking 2 to 3 hours,
Yeah,
probably minimum
yeah,
here.
yeah, yeah.
And
It's a
it, like,
while.
yeah, and it is like every second counts at this point. This
Mm-hmm.
is the most crucial time in a missing
Yeah.
person case.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't waste any time.
Mm-hmm.
By the next
Yeah.
morning, Marissa's parents reported her missing. Chelsea had made flyers and was putting them up in the
Oh.
area. And
Mm-hmm.
everyone immediately showed concern for Marissa,
Mm-hmm.
but there just wasn't any information.
Oh my God.
They had no clue what happened. Seemingly, she never would have left the venue. They didn't see her. They waited for her.
Mm-hmm.
And the police
Mm-hmm.
searched the venue and they didn't find her.
Mm-hmm.
So Marissa's dad wanted to take another step and he hired a private investigator.
Okay. Okay.
And obviously, it can
That's
be very
smart.
easy to get lost in a shuffle in a concert.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if you're already separated and then you're trying to meet up later,
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm-hmm.
understandably, it can be very difficult.
Ugh, that
But
is that is a nightmare situation for me. It is truly one of the things I get most anxious about when I go out to live music. I never want to get separated from the group because I'm like, it is just so difficult to find your way back.
see, I feel like I always end up getting separated, but I'm also one of those people where I'm like, I will find you. Like,
You're like, it won't be a problem. But I am
yeah,
not.
like, don't worry, I'll make it happen.
I'm easy to overlook and get like trapped behind tall dudes.
See, I'm tall, so I can like
You're
look over
lucky.
everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So we're a good team here.
Yeah, yeah, we got all avenues covered.
So we'll be good for our concert in the fall.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that her dad hired a PI too, because that's just like an extra, you know, line of defense for his family.
Exactly. And
I'm
that's
glad to
that's
hear
how
that.
that's why he hired them. Like, you
Yeah.
can tell that they truly didn't waste any time. They
Hmm.
knew something was wrong, and it doesn't sound like the police even gave them she's probably a runaway or that kind of
Hmm.
line that can often
Yeah.
be given.
Right.
It really sounds like everyone immediately responded to this as, yes, this is a missing persons case. We need to investigate right now.
Hmm. Hmm.
And there's a documentary called Educating Marissa, and it was made shortly after her death by her friends. And it's only about an hour long, and it'll be in our show notes. And we'll touch on it a little bit more later. But when I watched it, it was really kind of hard to watch because her friends are so young. And like, I remember being that age. I remember going to concerts. I remember feeling like everything was under control. And like, again, as I was saying in the top of the episode, I feel like I could have been in her shoes. And like, it was really kind of hard to watch because you realize how young they are. When you're 16, you don't feel that young.
16. No,
when you're like looking back on it.
Yeah, when you're 16, it's sort of like your first taste of being an adult, you know? You get to drive, you get to, you know, sort of make your own schedule, and she was already doing so many different things, you know, that she probably felt really in control of her life, which...
Absolutely.
Yeah, which I wish was the case. And it wasn't interrupted.
I never saw, like, exactly. I didn't see any evidence of this in any articles, but I do think it's something to kind of touch on, is the fact that they even got a limo. So no one would drive.
Yeah.
I never saw any reports of any drugs or alcohol used by any of the teenagers whatsoever. But even if you're talking about that part of being a teenager and if they want to experiment with drugs and alcohol, and in reality, if you're a teenager and you want to, you're going to find a way.
Right.
But if they did, which again, I saw no report of it, they even took that extra step of getting a safe ride home. Like, it really, the kind of like bigger picture scenario, they did everything they needed to do.
I was just going to say that it just sounds like they did all the right things. And I hate to hear that it still went wrong, you know? Because it sounds like this is a good group of kids, you know? They're making a documentary about their friend. That's lovely. And it just sounds like they did everything they were supposed to.
And I think that they were. And I think that every step of the way, they've done everything that they need to do. They went home, told one of their parents, immediately made the phone call to Marissa's parents. Like, I think it's commendable how these kids handled this situation.
Right.
Because, again, they're all 16.
Yeah. They easily could have been like, okay, well, nobody says anything when we go home.
Exactly.
And we don't tell anyone anything. But no,
her parents didn't know that she was there, so no one will find out.
Right. But they came right home and were ready to advocate for her.
Exactly. So now, the next few days, her family is just trying to do their best not to jump to conclusions, but they know that something had to have happened to her. She wouldn't have left on her own. She was 16. She clearly had a bright future ahead of her. She was surrounded by people who supported her dream and her choices. And she likely wouldn't have had any sort of desire or any need to run away. And her family assumed that this was the result of somebody doing something to her. But they hoped just in the end of it that they would get her back. So after those 3 days, after her disappearance, police did receive an anonymous tip saying to check the Sunshine Theater again. So they did a second search, and this search did yield some results. They found a body of a young blonde woman. She was nude with the exception of a t-shirt that was wrapped around her neck.
Oh, man.
I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail about how, like, specifically what happened to her. Partially, we don't know some details, but the details we do know, I don't think are necessary to the story. And I don't think it's needed in here, because it's sad. It's really sad.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm wow, I'm so surprised at like the brazenness of taking somebody from this theater and then going back and leaving a body in this theater.
Oh, just wait.
Okay.
Just wait.
Oh no.
It's yeah, you're not going to be
Oh
happy.
no. Okay, all right, I'm gonna get hot. All right, that's okay, I'll prepare.
So the person who left this tip to check the Sunshine Theater again told investigators to check out Dominic Akers. He was a janitor at the Sunshine Theater. And obviously, this tipster was able to lead investigators to her body.
Mm-hmm.
And so they took the second part of this tip very seriously and brought Akers in for questioning. And surprisingly, he immediately confessed.
Wow. Wow.
So obviously, this tipster knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, somebody knows. Somebody knows.
So, exactly. And let's backtrack a little bit and talk about Dominic Akers and his past a little bit. He absolutely has skeletons in his closet. And you're going to be pretty upset with what you hear and knowing that he wasn't behind bars for the rest of his life well before he murdered Marissa. And it's heart-wrenching. And this is going to be a bit of a trigger warning. In March of 2002, Akers was found guilty of molesting and raping a relative. This relative was his 4-year-old cousin.
What?
Yeah. This was 1 year. Well, really, I believe it was September they were at the concert. No, they were July. So she was just over 1 year.
Before. Wow.
Before.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
The evil. The evil.
It gets better.
Mm.
Akers pled guilty, which should have given him over 30 years in prison.
Hell yeah, it should have.
Somehow, the judge overturned his sentencing and gave him 5 months of probation.
What? Come on. Oh my God.
That's all he got.
Oh my God. 5 months of probation for a crime like that. That is an unconscionable crime against a child, a literal toddler. And you get 5 months of probation?
Mm-hmm.
That's insanity.
This judge also believed that therapy in conjunction with probation was enough to correct and rehabilitate Akers' behavior.
Okay, well, Your Honor, I would like to disagree. Because though therapy is incredible, I don't know if we can just throw therapy at something this big. That's a really big problem. I think he maybe needs therapy in conjunction with jail to correct or rehabilitate.
Exactly. Like, I think the probation part is what gets me more than anything. Like, I think he needs to be treated and figure out why he does these things if that's possible. Sometimes it's not, but if that's possible, yeah, that'd be great. But 5 months of probation means he's still out there.
Yeah. God.
And as we said, this was 1 year before her murder.
Which is bonkers. Did it say anywhere if they made him register as a sex offender?
Well, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
So this gave him the ability to live a normal life. Ugh. He was able to apply to jobs. And if he went through a background check, yeah, he would show up as a sex offender.
Mm-hmm.
But that was on the employer to determine whether he was allowed to work there or not.
Yeah.
And it sounds like the Sunshine Theater potentially did know that he was a sex offender and didn't care. That's not confirmed. So I haven't heard the Sunshine Theater make a statement. So I don't want to say, yes, they knew. Mm-hmm. But there's also a really good possibility they never did a background check to find out. It wasn't required.
Exactly. Yeah, I was going to say they may have just not done the background check, or they may have done the background check and thought, maybe we give this dude a shot. Maybe
See,
maybe
I've
they
heard
didn't
rumors
know.
and like in comments and stuff, that's what people were saying is they did one, but they're like, oh, it's probably fine. I don't want to say that for sure, but
Right.
I read
What
that
I
more than once.
what I'm curious about is if when he shows as a sex offender, it would tell that employer what crime he committed. I
Yeah,
wonder
I don't know.
because if they had known sort of like the severity of the issue at hand, maybe they never would have let him
Right.
in. I don't know. I don't know. But the point is,
Yeah,
they
I'm
did
not
let him
sure
in.
if it went that detailed. Yeah, they did let him in. He
Yeah.
did work as a janitor.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's jump back to Marissa and what Akers did to her. And as I said, I'm not going to go into too much detail on her injuries because it is unfortunately incredibly brutal. And you can already tell that he is a brutal man.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, but Akers gave a couple different stories. His first story was that Marissa had found Akers because she was trying to get some help with her foot.
Mm-hmm.
Akers was actually wearing a staff shirt that night.
Mm.
So Marissa could have easily and understandably thought that he worked at the theater as security potentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as I mentioned before, he did actually work there. He was a janitor, but he wasn't working that night. He was just there for the
Mm.
show. And Akers is a very big man. At the age of 22, he was 380 pounds and 6 feet tall.
Wow. Okay.
So
So
he
yeah.
very easily could overpower Marissa.
Oh yeah. I mean, 380 pounds and 6 feet tall. That's like running into a wall.
Mm-hmm. And so, with Marissa potentially believing that he worked security at the venue,
Mm-hmm.
and as I said, we aren't quite sure of this, but we're assuming that that's potentially what she thought.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he told her he could get her help with her foot, and get it cleaned up.
Mm-hmm.
He then also told her that he could help her meet Atmosphere.
Oh.
Specifically, one of the members who is nicknamed Slug, who Marissa had a very big crush on.
Mm.
So, like, you're talking to somebody who you think works for the venue, who you think
Right.
works for security,
Right.
saying, hey, yeah, I can introduce you to the band.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally see why she would have believed him and gone with him. The staff shirt alone, like, communicates something. So, and especially
Exactly.
being just 16 and hearing, like, yeah, sure, you can meet the band, like that, I understand.
Mm-hmm. And this is supposedly when Akers went and took her to a different area upstairs where he then overpowered her, raped her, and eventually strangled her.
Ugh, what an
That was the
evil.
first story.
Okay, so that's his first story. That he's saying all this. Okay, well.
Mm-hmm. So the second story was that he went to the concert just to go. He wasn't scheduled, as we mentioned, and that he had met Marissa after she had hurt her foot. And instead of helping her bandage it up and promising to introduce her to Slug, they had consensual sex on the third level projection room. And during that consensual sex, Marissa changed her mind and wanted to stop. She tried to get away. Akers got angry, choked her until she was unconscious. Then a short while later, she woke up, started to scream, and that's when he eventually choked her and killed her.
Hmm.
So
Lie.
very, very different stories here.
I feel like that's a lie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do too.
I don't think a 16-year-old was like, oh, screw the hot guy in the band that I'm really into. I'm going to go off with this security guard. And she's 16. Yeah, I don't buy
A
it.
16-year-old who is willing to talk to other teenagers about sex education is
Exactly.
not likely to go off with a stranger
No.
to have sex. Like, it's not
No.
impossible, not at
That
all, but it's less likely, I believe.
no, that's one of the first things I thought, that she was literally leading sex education conversations at her school. Like, it seems very unlikely to me that she would just go with this guy.
Exactly. And after Marissa was murdered, Akers left her body in the projection room,
Ugh.
and this room wasn't currently being used. But then the next morning, he was scheduled to work his cleaning shift, and he got to the theater early before the police did their initial search, and he moved her body and actually hid it behind a soda machine and a vending machine.
Ugh.
And that's where it was found a couple days later. So it was
Oh.
just unfortunately well hidden
Oh
during
no.
that initial search, and she was there.
Oh, I can't. That is. I don't know why that affected me so much, but like putting her body behind a soda and vending machine, like
Mm-hmm.
I I mean, we've already established this man is clearly evil and disturbed, but to just shove somebody's body back behind a vending machine, like
Yeah.
what kind? It's unfathomable to me.
Yeah, it really is. And it's hard to kind of put in that like discomfort it gives you into
Mm-hmm.
words. But it is
Mm-hmm.
like, it's a very uncomfortable feeling to think
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
And so remember, Marissa's body was found and Akers' name was introduced to investigators because of an anonymous tip.
Mm-hmm.
We find out who this tipster is.
Oh.
It's Akers' father.
Oh.
He had told his father what happened,
Oh.
and his father determined that Marissa's family needed to know the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Oh gosh.
Yeah, so I have to commend his father in being able to recognize that your child has done something so terrible and
Mm-hmm.
it deserves to be punished for that.
Mm-hmm. That has to be up there with, hearing what Marissa's family heard, that she might not be able to come home, but hearing that your child committed a crime like this, like, that means your child is likely going to be jailed and punished and will be away from you. But it is commendable that he was like, no, we're not just gonna let you roam free. You deserve to be punished for what you've done.
Well, I also wonder how his father felt about the probation.
Mm-hmm.
If
Yeah,
his father felt like that was not worthy punishment,
that's a good,
and
yeah.
then now he also does this,
Mm-hmm.
I would assume he feels a responsibility to make it known.
Yeah. Maybe he was like, it's finally time for him to get taken off the streets. He's doing damage to our family
Mm-hmm.
and to other families now.
Exactly. And so this case really kind of seems pretty simple. It had a quick end to this case as a whole. It was solved. An arrest was made, a confession within a couple days of the murder.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a lot of aftermath in this
Mm-hmm.
case, which is very good. But it's heart-wrenching because it's obviously everything that comes out of this case is because of something so terrible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Atmosphere really seemed to kind of struggle with this once they found out the details.
Mm-hmm.
And within a couple of months, they did a tribute concert for Marissa. They went back to
Oh.
Arizona for it. They
Oh.
were actually in the middle of the tour and they rescheduled things around to make sure that this benefit show was happening,
Mm-hmm.
and it was happening quickly.
Yeah.
And they ended up writing a song about it. And it's clear as day that the lyrics are about this case and about Marissa.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the lyrics are, "That night we lost a supporter. That night we lost a daughter. He raped and killed her in the venue. I can't comprehend what her friends went through. That night the sun went dark. Now watch everyone as the tour bus falls apart. That night, Lord have mercy. Music died that night in Albuquerque."
Oh.
And so obviously there's no question.
Yeah,
Um,
there's no question. They were really hurting about this.
mhm. And I believe it was Slug, that one that she had a crush on, actually
Hmm.
got the date of her murder tattooed on his neck,
Oh,
because
wow.
it had such a significant impact on him.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow.
Another thing that happened after her death was laws changed in New Mexico.
Hmm.
After her murder, New Mexico changed their laws and they now require employers to do background checks.
Okay, well, yeah, yeah.
And investigators actually discovered during this that New Mexico had some of the most relaxed laws when it came to employer requirements and background checks.
Oh.
And it kind of became known as a place where felons could go and easily get jobs that they wouldn't be able to get elsewhere because of their criminal record.
Mm.
And then there's also Marissa's Law, and that creates and require that was created and requires more jail or prison time for sex offenders. And once sex offenders are released, they are monitored under parole for a longer period of time.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And again, this is the
Yes.
issue with Akers.
Mm-hmm.
He had just a couple months of probation for a heinous crime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably thought I can get away, I can get away with whatever I want.
Exactly.
After something
So these are
so evil that he did, to only then do something equally as evil again to a
mm-hmm,
young child. And you're 22.
exactly.
You know
Oh,
these
you
are
know
children.
better.
You know these are
Yeah,
children that you're harming.
exactly. And so these changes were a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
They're very, very good changes in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like this was the final push to make things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And as I mentioned earlier, I was watching that documentary called Educating Marissa,
Mm-hmm.
and it was made by her friends. And in that documentary, they mentioned that she had signed up for some self-defense courses with a
Mm-hmm.
group called Impact.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to talk a little bit about Impact because I think it's a really good conversation that some people don't realize.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it is an organization that was created by a woman who was very educated in martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
But she was attacked and raped, and she felt like her martial arts education didn't benefit her.
Mm.
It
Okay.
wasn't the best form of self-defense.
Mm-hmm.
And so she wanted to really try to figure out what that best form is
Mm-hmm.
and learn different techniques and then teach others. So she
Wow.
developed Impact.
Wow.
She studied how assailants would typically attack and then how to appropriately counterattack and defend yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And also in this documentary, they asked a handful of Marissa's classmates if they had ever learned self-defense techniques in high school. Everyone said no, but they wished that they did. And
Mm-hmm.
I never learned it.
Yeah,
I,
me
I
neither.
I never even really thought about it back then, but that would be fantastic to learn.
Mm-hmm. That would be a great, great thing to introduce. I mean, we already have a physical education requirement for students, so this would be a
Yeah, you can
phenomenal.
absolutely put it in there.
Yeah.
And after her murder, all of her friends signed up for Impact classes together.
Mm.
And they all also mentioned that they wish that their school would expand their sexual education courses so that you don't just learn about like how your body changes during puberty and general sex health, but
Mm-hmm.
to also include sex education information for if you're raped, what do you do?
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that was never covered in
Mm.
school for me,
No. No.
but that should be.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, there's fully a place where you can fold this into the curriculum. If you're already doing health classes, basic health classes with your students, this is something, that you could easily discuss that would benefit everyone.
Exactly. And then just the last thing I kind of want to mention was what I mentioned very early in the episode was marissamission.org. And this was developed by friends and family. And I really like this organization.
Mm-hmm.
This is what their About Me section on their website says, is the Marissa mission fosters youths in nurturing and playful environment, encouraging development in vibrant, confident, and healthy people through improvisational tribal style belly dance. Um, I think this is yoga practice. Uh, Tribal dance, yoga practice, expressive art, and community and empowering life skills. And to me, this just sounds like a collective group of people who are trying to support each other through healthy, I don't even know how to put it into other words,
Yeah.
through healthy communication and support of each other.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it seems like they have a real focus on helping these young people become who they want to be, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they go on to say that we offer an uncommon opportunity to which few teens have access. A
Mm-hmm.
supportive environment free of judgment where you can feel comfortable, be yourself, and share your interest with others. We encourage living life to its fullest while endeavoring to leave little disorder, pollution, or negativity as possible while here on earth. Instead, we share and love we share our love and positivity. We gather in this community to celebrate each other, inspiring these beautiful young people to be powerful creators and leaders, always remembering that we are comprised of infinite possibilities, stardust, wonderment, and hope.
Oh, that's
Like it
so.
it sounds like a kind of like a like early 70s
Yeah.
community
Yeah.
um of people who are just truly free spirited, but at the same time it feels structured the way I was reading everything, just to give people a community where they can care about each other
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
support each other.
Yeah. I mean, it's beautiful. And they're right. It is an uncommon opportunity. It is, different things. And I think that's one of the best way is you can motivate, a young person. You can offer them something new to try, something different. And then they can
Hmm.
explore who they are through that avenue.
Exactly. And it is a nonprofit. It's a 5031c, and that in itself I think also shows that like it's not there to put money in anyone's pockets. It's there to
No.
help people.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish them all the success in this. I am a
Mm-hmm.
true believer in the ability to share kindness and realize that sharing hate will only make the world more miserable.
Mm-hmm.
We will be better off as a society if we just make an attempt to be nice to each other. Like, we'll all have bad days, and it'll be impossible to be like sort of peachy keen all the time. But there's room for improvement. And I think organizations like this is great starting points, especially for teenagers. So that is the case of Marissa Mathy-Zvaifler. Do you have any thoughts?
I do. Just that I love that they have made their mission kindness and hope because
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the world is wanting of that. And
Yes.
I think it's one of the most important things to me just as I move through my life that I am kind. I just want to spread that and I love that they are inclusive of everyone in saying that they're comprised of infinite possibilities. They are. everyone is. And
Absolutely.
I think that's wonderful. And I wish, you know, we said that earlier, that all these good things didn't have to come out of something so tragic happening to someone so young after
Hmm.
someone so evil got let off the hook.
And it's somebody who I don't even want to say her choosing to sneak out's a mistake. Somebody
Mm-hmm.
who made a decision that went against her norm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like we
And
said,
unfortunately that was the outcome.
yeah, like we said, it sounded like they had everything right, that they did everything they were supposed to do. And you know, yeah, it's so hard to hear that it had to end up like this, especially when that person had been previously prosecuted and found guilty of such an evil crime, only to
Exactly.
turn him back onto the streets and take somebody who was so young and by all accounts so vibrant and would have done amazing things, I feel sure.
Yeah,
And
I have no doubt that she would have gone on to be the fashion designer that she wanted to be, and
yeah.
that she would have been an incredibly successful woman
Hmm.
if
And
he didn't stifle that.
yeah. And I guess, yeah, just as a final thought, like, I would say, you know, my thoughts are with her friends that had to go through this. It's so young to have to lose somebody so tragically again. And I just hope that they're able to find healing from it and find them a way to this mission where they can again feel comfortable to share kindness and be open and not have to be afraid.
Yeah, and I recommend everyone to watch the Educating Marissa documentary because it was made by her friends and it was made to share her story, but also to share that message
Mm-hmm.
that we can treat people with kindness and we can live by that motto,
Mm-hmm.
and our world will be a better place if we can just all do it.
Yeah, agreed.
So we'll link it. I recommend everyone to watch it. It's only an hour long. Um, but and I'll link Marissa's Law. Link Marissa's Mission. All of that you'll have in the show notes because I think that these are really good organizations that are truly meant to only do good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that is all that we have for you today. Thank you for listening to Have You Heard About This Case? You can find us on Instagram at Have You Heard About This Case Pod, on Twitter at HYHATC Pod, or you can email us at Have You Heard About This Case at gmail.com. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.